So you will recall during our last debate surrounding the proposition of term limits, the conversation turned to the idea that there are carrots and sticks that we can use with regard to ensuring a healthy turnover of city council, and more importantly, removing the barriers that might be faced by certain members of our population in seeking public office. So the municipal, and at the time I suggested a motion arising to address parental leave, because parental leave is definitely something that the lack of a parental leave policy might be something that makes the idea of representing the citizens of Calgary as a city councillor at a certain stage of life one bridge too far. And we want to remove barriers to service. And I asked if I could bring a motion arising in that regard, and I was told by the mayor, bring a notice of motion. Two things have happened since then. The first one was that Edmonton actually brought forward their own parental leave. And if you look at the MGA clearly states that it is the responsibility of individual councils to establish their own parental leave policies for members of council. The other thing that happened is that my colleague to the right, totally separate from all of this.
Hey, stop talking. Yeah. Councillor Woolley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just flagged this with the city solicitor that given that I am an expected parent in August, that, well,
you planned that right.
I do not plan on taking any sort of parental leave as a part of this. There may be a pecuniary interest.
I think it's probably safer for you to absent yourself from this discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And the only reason I brought up Councillor Woolley is because this was something that took place completely in a separate space from what was happening in his family, and I had no idea that was happening.
Yes.
So, as a woman who could potentially be pregnant at any point, should I recuse myself from this conversation as well?
That's a good point.
Do you have news for us? No.
None that I know of.
I think the general rule is that, number one, you have to get a benefit that is not available to generally the class.
Don't look at us.
To a large...
We're out.
Men are allowed to be parents too. There are a number of men of childbearing age here as well. Yep. In fact, I would say there are 13 men of childbearing age around here. That said, it also has to be reasonably close. I forget what the actual legal term is, but it has to be reasonably close to you. I think that Councillor Woolley, in abundance of caution, since this came up right after he announced he was having a baby, probably wants to not influence his decision.
My point was that this came up before he announced, and it has nothing to do with it. And that's the only point that I really want to belabor.
Yeah, but we're debating it now, so.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
But the point is that this was put on our legislative agenda before anyone except for Councillor Woolley was aware that this was happening, and had nothing to do with him or his family circumstance. This is more sort of an expansion of sort of the gender equity and diversity work, and the idea that the moves we make with regard to city council should be to make it more accessible to more Calgarians of all ages, stages, and wages. And this is just good policy. So what I've done, I think administration was freaking out at the thought that they would have to sort of develop a parental leave. So I've thrown this into the coordinating office of the councillors, coordinating committee of the office of the councillors, or the CCCO, because that's really the job of that. And that came late in the project.
The longtime chair looks super happy about it, and he is next on the list. So,
but I think it's the right thing to do. What it looks like and how it works out, we need to work through that. But this is the direction to develop that policy, and I thank council in advance for their support. And I will listen closely to the debate and try and offer whatever debate is necessary in my close.
Thanks very much. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Davison, thank you. You're having more? I will point out, however, although Ms. Cole is telling me not to point it out, I believe that we should be very specific, that in the MGA, in section 170, sub 3D, there is actually an exception to the pecuniary interest, which is a pecuniary interest that a council may have with respect to any allowance, honorarium, remuneration, or benefit to which the councillor may be entitled by being a councillor. Which actually makes sense because we have to make decisions about our own payment. So the pecuniary interest is actually exempt from that. I did not know that. If he wants to, he could. Councillor Jones, please.
Well, Your Worship, CCO seems to be the dumping ground for all those motions that nobody knows where to put.
Because you're an
I'm not
exceptionally
going to
good
write a
chair.
report on parental leave for councillors, and I can't speak for the other 4 members of my committee, and if they have the expertise to do it, they can do it, and they're all shaking their heads. But I think that I'd like to change the first whereas it therefore be resolved to direct the coordinating committee of the office of the councillors to say human resources, because the people in human resources have a great deal more wherewithal to do this than we do. Because I don't know who would write the report.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that it should probably, I think what Councillor, I'm going to try to read Councillor Carra's mind, always a dangerous thing. I believe that what he was trying to say was that obviously administration would prepare the report, but it would come to council through CCCO.
Unfortunately, that's not what it says.
No, it is not what it says.
I want Ray Jones to write the report.
You ain't getting
And
any
I was
money.
told it wasn't, that was too specific, I was told.
Right. So let's just, I'm sure Councillor Carra and Councillor Davison wouldn't mind if we missed this around, which is that council direct administration to prepare a report, blah, 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 and return to council through the CCCO no later than Q2 2018.
Sure.
Okay. You're okay with that? You're okay with that? Oh, he's gone. I'm sure he's okay with it. All right. Councillor Sutherland, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually have a couple of legal questions regarding this matter for Ms. Cole. With the length, if there's a determined duration of the leave, if it was more than the allowable amount of council meetings that you're allowed to miss under the MGA, the parental, would that supersede it?
Your Worship, the MGA was specifically amended very recently to actually include this provision around maternity and parental leave. So I would suggest that what the province was trying to do is carve out a specific exemption around that issue for people on maternal or paternal leave.
Okay. So in other words, you're saying yes, you'd be fine.
I'm saying that it's fine under the Municipal Government Act. In fact, Edmonton recently passed a bylaw along these lines that could be used by the city as at least a starting point for its deliberations.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, you touched on it there, what you just said was the parental and maternity leave. So I'm assuming the definition of those two are quite different. What is parental and what is maternity leave?
I can tell you that, Your Worship, I can tell you that Edmonton defined parental leave as a period of time during which a councillor may be absent from all council, standing committee or council committee meetings and any other duties assigned to the councillor by council. And the policy is available to any councillor who wishes to take parental leave prior to or after the birth or adoption of their child for a period not to exceed 26 weeks. And then there are provisions in the bylaw that deal with what will happen to that councillor's responsibilities during the time the councillor is away, and to what extent the councillor will receive compensation for the duties that they are choosing to perform during that period.
Okay, and maternity?
It all falls under parental leave.
So it's one and the same, because one of the questions that was discussed is whether or not parental leave would apply to, for example, if one of the councillors, their child was extremely sick and they had to stay in the hospital or whatever type of stuff. Would that be considered parental leave, or is that something totally outside of the scope?
It just says, subject to the bylaw, councillor may take parental leave prior to or after the birth or adoption of their child. I thought there was a section that dealt with other circumstances. There is a section that talks about, for the limited purpose of confirming that the councillor is performing duties to receive partial remuneration. If that's the case, the city manager may make reasonable inquiries during parental leave. So I would suggest that those are very good questions, Your Worship, that council members will want to debate in terms of what they include in their own bylaw.
Okay, thank you for that understanding, because, yeah, that was my interpretation of parental rather than maternity. So apparently it's not, so that's up for debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chahal, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to read something I just came across. Paternity leave. The federal budget is expected to include a 5-week use it or lose it incentive for new fathers to take parental leave and share the responsibilities of raising their baby. So, and there's some further comments on here. I'm just wondering if our HR and CCCO, upon this happening, need to take that into consideration on whatever policy we do develop. So that's a comment for consideration. I do have a couple of questions. I'm not sure who can answer this, Ms. Cole or somebody else. The leave, as there's leave for, so are there other provisions that can be explored for councillors who do not want to take leave but would need additional support given their added responsibility of parenting? And the mover can maybe talk about that. Can other options for support be integrated into a bylaw for parental leave for councillors, specifically other than leave? Let's say, one doesn't want to take a leave and wants to continue on working here, but for daycare or flexible work options, among other things, that the bylaw could explore. Flexibility in parental supports for any councillors that may become new parents. So I guess what I'm looking for is for a flexible approach to offer different various options for councillors who want to become new parents or need to take a parental leave. I may have a friendly amendment to add to this if the mover and the seconder wouldn't mind entertaining.
Let Ms. Cole answer your question, then I'll come back to you, okay?
Your Worship, the Municipal Government Act is very clear on this point. It says a council of a municipality may, by bylaw, having regard to the need to balance councillors' roles as parents with their responsibilities as representatives of residents, establish whether councillors are entitled to take leave prior to or after the birth or adoption of their child. So it's very specific to prior to or after the birth or adoption of their child. This is a brand new section of the Municipal Government Act, so there's no case law interpreting it, at least in Alberta at this point. But it's quite specific.
So there's nothing that for additional supports, I guess, other than taking a physical leave that we could look at. I think that's where I'm getting to. I wanted to see if there's more flexibility for one, if required.
So there have been other times, Your Worship, when members of council have taken a leave to run in other elections. In fact, council recently discussed that. So we can assist the council's office coordinating committee by looking at all those issues for you if you like. But I just want to be very clear that this new section of the MGA is very specific.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keating?
Thank you, Worship. I kind of remember us having a discussion a while ago that we are unable to collect EI benefits. Am I correct in that statement?
Correct.
So we don't pay EI benefits at all?
No.
I didn't think so. And most of the compensation that you would be talking about usually comes from that sort of organization, you might say. So I'm not quite sure, just raising that, because if we are unable to collect it, I'm not sure how it would fit into this and where it would go from and who would cover the cost. So just whether it's there. My other question doesn't have to be answered now, but it can be, are there any ways in which the MGA covers the fact that voting at a council meeting and thing could be done by someone else? Because if you're on leave, in many other organizations, you're replaced. So do we have the physical capabilities of that here, or does it have to be that whoever's on leave is gone and nobody else would take that spot and allow for voting on issues?
Ms. Cole?
Your Worship, just to respond to the first question, I can tell you that Edmonton's bylaw provides that during the first 10 weeks of parental leave, a councillor receives full remuneration that they would have otherwise received. For weeks following that 10 weeks, they can receive a percentage of remuneration depending on whether they are able to or wish to perform their duties during that period. And there's actually a schedule of the relationship between duties performed and the percentage. And then I believe there's a section that deals with having a different council member assist you. If another councillor provides coverage during parental leave, there has to be an agreement between the councillors and a discussion with council about that. In terms of proxy voting, I'm not aware of anything in the MGA that speaks to one council member voting on behalf of another one, but I can tell you that we've never actually looked at that issue.
No. It's just, again, items that we'd have to look at to some degree when it comes time to actually putting it in place, because it may be down to one less vote would change, in some cases, it may change a lot of the patterns in the future, Your Worship. So something to be looked at. But I'm assuming when you said this, they would receive that numeration, that is from the city budget, not from any other outside agencies or organizations in Edmonton.
As far as I'm aware.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Farkas, please.
Question for Ms. Cole. Under the applicable portion of the revised MGA, are we required to have a parental leave bylaw, or is it that we may?
Your Worship, the Act is very clear. A council may, by bylaw, having regard to that need, establish whether councillors are entitled to take leave. And then if you choose to pass a bylaw, there's certain things that need to be included within it. The length of the leave and other terms and conditions of the entitlement, and addressing how the municipality will continue to be represented. So it is optional, Your Worship.
I really respect and I admire the intent of this motion. I see it as attempting to remove barriers, especially for those looking at a career in politics, as well as ensuring a diverse range of candidates are able to apply for the job. But I don't see this as a career like any other. I'm very concerned that we may be going down a line where we're introducing unelected representation. And I have an open mind to ultimately, if this does pass, what the policy may be to actually take a look at that time. But at this point, I'm not able to support this. I don't see this as an ordinary job. I think we're elected to serve for a fixed term. This is not a job like any others. We give up a lot to be here. So do our families. I think we have a lot of job flexibility, and I think that the intent of this can be served within the purview that we have within running our own office hours. But every day we make really important decisions. If I'm not here in part of those decisions, I find that to be a betrayal of those who elected me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dumont.
Wow. I don't even know how to respond to that last speaker.
Don't.
I have to, Your Worship.
Okay.
I'm sorry. 2013 election in Alberta saw 26% female candidates elected. 2017 saw 29%. This is after a sustained 10-year campaign to try to get more women involved in politics. There have been numerous reports that show, I believe it's 30%, 35% women in decision-making changes the tone of a conversation. If we don't do what even the most basic job, you can be a plumber, you can be a checkout girl, you can be a electrician, you can be a CEO of a company. You have the option of taking a maternity leave. If there's something about this chair, maybe that's it, I don't know. If you turn around and you basically say, you can only take this job if you promise to not have a child, I don't even know what to say in response to that. I'm offended. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. I'm done.
Thanks, Councillor Dumont.
If I may, just on a point of privilege.
No, you can't.
No,
Councillor Gondek, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have absolutely nothing prepared because I did not foresee the conversation taking this bizarre turn, but
Me neither.
I think I need to weigh in a little bit here. Just personally, I had a child. I delivered a baby and then delivered a report 3 weeks later to a client and worked after I had said child. It didn't rob me of my decision-making ability, didn't rob me of my mental capacity. In fact, it was a welcome diversion at times. Granted, I was sleep deprived, but I still enjoyed my work. Putting it in the context of this role, I'm going to change the conversation a bit. If this conversation was around somebody with a disability or an injury that kept you out of council chambers, we would do everything we could to figure out a way that that person could join in from home or their hospital bed or wherever it happened to be. We have the technology, for God's sake, why don't we use it? I am appalled that somebody would say you cannot represent your constituents because you have a child. Unbelievable to me. We have to figure out a way to do it because there are prime ministers in other nations that are having babies and still able to lead. I think a council member should be able to do that. Can't believe what I heard from my fellow councillor.
Thanks. I'm going to weigh in on this. I didn't think I would have to, but I will. I could not agree more with Councillor Demong. It has been a very, very, very big issue for me since before I myself was in public life to figure out ways to systemically remove barriers to the participation of everyone in public life, particularly to the participation of women. And many of you know that long before I decided to be a politician, I spent a lot of time trying to convince others to run for city council. And I struck out every single time with every single woman that I asked. And I always joke that I'm used to striking out with women, but this was different. Because I heard the system is geared against a family life. I've got small children, or I want to have small children. You meet late at night. I don't want my kids to have to deal with stuff on the playground, and so on. We can't fix all of that, but we can fix some of it. And this is a small gesture in a huge budget to say, yes, you are welcome here. You do not have to delay your desire to participate in public life until your family situation fixes it. We can do it. And as we've seen with our provincial government, cabinet ministers have had children in office, as you say, Councillor Farrell, in New Zealand. I believe the Prime Minister, is that correct, is pregnant now? So we can do it. And this is a small gesture towards just opening up the doors and saying we do better when we have a truly representative council. I can't imagine why anyone would vote against this. With that, Councillor Carrata, close.
Yeah, well, I was really enjoying the line of questioning that council was engaging in, because that's exactly the kind of discussion and debate I envision taking place at the CCCO with the support of HR as we sort of walk through this. And so thank you for amending that. I think administration was freaking out a little bit about this just being thrown into their court. I think a healthy debate amongst us is very important. I'm glad that the conversation sort of taking the turn that it did was so ably steered back on course by Councillors Demong and Gondek and Your Worship. I look forward to this debate ensuing and us coming up with another, made in Calgary but world-leading solution to increase inclusivity. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request for a recorded vote on this, please.
Never mind.
Oh, shoot. What was it?
Sorry. Well, I had said that
You can address all of it.
later.
Yeah, there's no.
Okay, it's not a big deal. Okay. All right. Done.
All right, I don't even know what just happened there, but okay. We'll go to the recorded vote. Thank you.
That's not what I said.
Councillor Sutherland, 4. Councillor Carra, 4. Councillor Farrell, 4. Councillor Collier-Cart, 4. Councillor Jones, 4. Councillor Farkas against. Councillor Chu, 4. Councillor Maglioka, 4. Councillor Davison, 4. Councillor Keating, 4. Councillor Gondek, 4. Councillor Chahal, 4. Councillor Demong, 4. Mayor Nenshi, 4. It's carried, Your Worship.
Thanks, Councillor Jones.
13-1. Thank you.